thing. You know you've got to grab the bottom cup, cut it a little long, and the bending we're going to do is all going to be done on the upper end, not the bottom. So this is where we're going to cut it, slightly longer than we need it. And there's a secret to making the thing touch the cup. This clamp has got to make good connection for electrical reasons and for holding reasons. But it's a flat surface and you're connecting to a round surface, so it's never going to touch perfectly. And I'm going to show you the best way to make it happen. So you cut it a little long. Now it's time to make the L. Don't worry about how close you've come, because you can bend the top later. Let's worry about getting this thing bent and catching that bottom cup. Make a sharp L, sharp as you can. And this is very tough. Make sure you're wearing eye protection and gloves if you need them. Now this will not connect very well unless you bend up the center, and this is difficult. You'll need a good pair of snips to bend this up slightly and down on the sides. If you'll bend this just like this on all of these clamps, you will find you will have much better success at grabbing the edge of the condiment cup. The edge is round, the clamp is flat, so you have to make some adjustments to grab this edge. If it's not perfect, it's okay, as long as it can handle a bang on the counter test, which we will get to later. And we've purposely made this long because we're going to bend the top of this to catch the top of the cup, and we can make adjustments up here much easier than we can to that sharp L down on the bottom. Once we have 3 of these made, we will have an incredibly strong fuel cell stack. Now, this is fine for the positive. It's already getting very tough. These positives are holding on here. You could just about play catch with this thing. It's important that you wear eyewear protection during the building of this, because this thing actually holds potential energy as you clamp it down. You have springs in your hand, and springs can be very dangerous. This thing can fly apart at any minute and can damage your eyes, so be very careful. We take the top piece, we bend it, just like we have for the other 2 elements. It's very simple, and once you get started at this, just simply like a little puzzle, it's going to hold itself together very, very well. And as you build it, it will get tighter and tighter. You'll have to make adjustments, but always adjust the top, never adjust the bottom. That little sharp L is way too difficult to make. You can cut your hands bending this steel. Be very careful. I've been bending metal for years. That's why I'm not wearing gloves. I assure you I am a professional at bending stuff. So please, wear gloves if you need them. If you don't, you could hurt yourself very badly bending this very firm steel. This is the shape you're going to want for the top. It goes over the edge of the cup, and then it has this little thing on the end which is going to grab the alligator clip nicely and make a good solid electrical connection. This is about what you're shooting for. We've already got 2 of these on here. This is the third. The third is special because it's going to have an insulator, and it's not going to grab the bottom cup. That's right, this one is going to grab cup number 5, which is located right above the bottom cup. We're going to make the adjustments from the top, so let's just really worry about the L at the bottom that has to grab this other cup. Now we have to have an insulation material. We're going to use a piece of hose. This is just vinyl tubing. We're going to cut it slightly wider than we need, split it, flatten it out, and we're going to use this as an insulating material for our negative electrical strap. This will do the job just nicely to prevent electrical current from traveling from our positive to our negative in the close proximity at the edge. We cut it, and we begin to make our L. Again, even though we're shooting for the 5th cup, we cut it long, and we'll adjust it from the top. It's much easier. We bend our L, and we give it the angle it needs to grab that cup. It's a very important little trick. May take several pairs of pliers for you to get this right. Some tapping, bending. Certainly not easy. Helps to have several different kinds of pliers for grabbing different edges. I think I had 3 or maybe even 4 different pairs of pliers working on this. So it really does help. Bend the center up, bend the corners down, and you've got a condiment cup grabbing strap. Your actual shapes may vary, but it should look something a lot like this. We have to connect an alligator clip to it, and it has to connect to the cup, and it has to miss the top cup with the insulator. This is what a finished fuel cell element actually looks like after 100 miles of driving. Very efficient way of making hydrogen oxygen fuel. This is an incredibly powerful fuel cell which actually can make too much gas. The zip ties remain firm, and you can see that it will take a lot of pressure as you're putting this together to reach the final product size. Once you get it to the proper height, it will maintain this height, and it holds together very well once you've electrified it.
See, I overshot the cup, right?
Now we overshoot the cup purposely when we're installing the negative so that we can make it very tight. The negative plate is very important because we only have one main negative strap which connects to the plate. We bend this so that it's very tight. And in the process of doing this, once we snap this on, the other 2 straps may become loose and will require some more adjustment. This is normal. You may have to do this 4 or 5 times. It can be very frustrating or very enjoyable depending upon how you look at puzzles. You snap this on, snaps right into position, grabs the cup, and voila, you have a fuel cell. Whoops, but wait a minute. It's loosened one of the other ones. So now you got to go back and tighten the next one. Eventually, you'll get this thing extremely tight. You have to make sure that none of the cups are touching each other, and sometimes it's better just to break the whole thing down and rebuild it from scratch once you have these 3 main connecting straps built. You can actually feel this thing getting firm in your hand. Occasionally tap it on the table. If pieces fly off, you know you've got problems and you have to go back and readjust. We're actually shooting for a triangle pattern, so I may want to move this one strap down a bit to get more of an actual triangle pattern. This thing is very firm, and the only thing left to do now is adding an electrical jumper between cup number 5 and cup number 2. That's our negative plates. And you can see how this thing is holding together on its own power.
Okay, now then. We have to
Now we're going to need a piece of metal to connect this cup here to the cup right below the top cup. This jumper will give us the negative plates we need that will produce the hydrogen oxygen gas in abundance. We add an extra insulator to give us a little bit more room to play with on this top connection, because we're going to grab the inside of the cup and not the outside lip. So we give ourselves a little greater margin for safety. We don't want to short out against any of these other cups. So we're going to bend a C like before, only we're going to go over the edge of this cup. The insulator, which is now zip ties, will protect us against electrical shorting out on the cups. So we measure twice, we cut once, and we bend as many times as necessary to get this right. This clamp needs to be on here very firmly. It took me quite a bit of time to actually work this piece in, so there's a little bit of editing going on here to make this done in a reasonable amount of time. So here's the C that we actually snap onto the fuel cell. This is our jumper. This makes sure that our negative plates are going to be cup number 2 and cup number 5. And that's pretty much the entire fuel cell. There's nothing complicated about it, and the design of the fuel cell itself is absolutely not critical. 2 stainless steel washers in close proximity will actually make enough hydrogen-oxygen gas to do the trick. This is just a very efficient, very interesting design which will make a lot of gas, can be replaced easily, doesn't cost a lot, and it does a marvelous job. Getting the actual boost using HHO fuel comes in actually using the fuel itself, not in producing it. Once we have our jumper in place, this thing is really firm. All of our connections are together. Truly is very tight. We take and ready our clamps for the electrical connection. This one with the insulator is negative. This is our negative plate. These are positive, the ones on the outside that actually grab the top cup. They are what is called the anode. This is the negative. This is the positive. And it does make a difference because we don't want the other cups to degrade. Only the anode will degrade. So we only have to replace 2 cups instead of 4.
Really good grip on that. Okay.
You're going to have to make some adjustments in order to get the alligator clips to properly connect these stainless steel connections. When you get a firm connection from the alligator clips, you should be able to survive a drop test. Now, you don't want this thing actually banging the bottom of the glass jar. However, you can let it rest against the jar during operation. That's fine. You just don't want it banging back and forth. The springs that you see are actually inductors, and they're also a safety device, which I'll demonstrate near the end of the video. Now this lid, we just simply poke 2 holes for the wires that fit the number 10 solid wire. There's a reason we use solid copper wire. The solid copper wire won't suffer wicking like stranded wire. Wicking is a capillary action in which the water will actually travel up the wire to the source of the electrical connection. It would be a very bad thing. Now these wires have coatings on them, and we want to preserve as much of it as we can. We want a very tight fit as these wires go down the jar. If we have to sacrifice this outer thin coating, we sacrifice it. But if we can keep it, we keep it. But we must have an almost airtight fitting. True, we're going to insulate this later, but we want to get as close as we can to an airtight seal. So we work with this until we get the proper altitude of the jar and the lid and the fuel cell. Use a pair of pliers to bend the wires over so that you don't damage your connections that you've accomplished below. It's very critical that you only use number 10 gauge solid copper wire. These coils that you see are actually inductors. They go down to the fuel cell, and it has to do with amp flow. We'll try to explain more about this, but mainly you just want to get all this together and make sure that the wires are bent at the proper angles so that you can screw it down. And once you find that proper bend, it should go back together for you just fine, no problems. It can be a little tricky. You have to go back and forth, bending wires, adjusting, readjusting, and eventually you will find the sweet spot for the wires, the fuel cell, and the nature of the solid copper wire makes it very durable once you reach this spot. You do want to put a little altitude between the wire and the top of the lid. This allows us to put some sealing putty in here to make sure that it always has a vacuum-proof seal. We finally got it together, and this is going to do an awesome job for us. Now we need to put a circuit breaker on the positive wire. You can get this circuit breaker at an automotive supplier for generally less than $5. I got this one for about $4. This one carries 20 amps of electrical power. Now we used to run our fuel cell much stronger, and we found that our results did not improve at all. 20 amps is more than enough. Generally 12 amps of HHO fuel, when applied to your combustion engine, will give you the boosts and the cleaning power and the improvements that you're looking for. You just simply cut the wire Install this in between the circuit. Do this to the positive wire. Snip it, trim the wire back, bend it around the terminal, and you're good to go. Now when you're hooking this fuel cell to your car's electrical system, if you don't have any experience with working with 12-volt electricity, you're going to need a professional to help you, or at least a friend who has some knowledge of hooking up 12-volt supply devices. This entire fuel cell runs on a 12-volt circuit, but it does run some high amperage, from 12 to 20 amps of power. You want to make sure that the wires that you use are actually oversized. That way there's no heating of the wire and you have an extremely efficient electrical design. You hook this onto the circuit breaker, and this is going to protect you against an electrical short. Also, if you add too much baking soda to your fuel cell, this little circuit breaker will actually cycle on and off and protect you from pulling too much electrical energy from your alternator, your car's electrical system, and protect the wires from actually burning up. You also should fuse the power that you run to this circuit from the battery. It's really simple, and if you have some experience with electrical, it will do a world of good when you go putting this in your vehicle. What we are using here is a 3/8 OD crush-proof